Hello everyone, I'm Elfels, and welcome to another match analysis for the Newport Noctiles in Season 10 of Uber Club League. Last time I covered my match against the Baltimore Oricorios in Week 7, in which I took a nice 5-0 victory to bring my record up to 7-0 for the season. That means the Noctiles are the guaranteed number 1 seed for the playoffs, with the next best teams all having, I believe, 5-2 records. No matter what happens in Week 8, we will still have the best record of any team this season, and that technically makes this match pretty low stakes, but I would really like to grab that undefeated regular season after only losing one match in Season 8. That and our opponent this week is Fruit Taco, or Michael, over on Birbs, another top contender this season, and I'd kind of like to show my mettle against him and his impressive team. That team is going to consist of Lycanroc, Raichu Kanto, Liepard, Charizard, Flygon, Gallade, Sandslash Vaporeon, Alchemy, Amora, and Shuckle. Good team, and I'm going to stop for a second and say, look how cool this team is. Maybe I'm biased, Gallade and Shuckle are some of my personal favorite Pokemon, and I've used Alolan Sandslash in a past season, but this team just gets so many style points from me. Definitely my favorite draft team to watch this season. If I can't win this season, I hope this one does, honestly. Definitely just so cool. And not only that, but Michael has actually done some pretty amazing things with the team. He's been using a lot of different types of offense with 3 different weather cores to choose from: Charizard in Manual Sun, Lycanroc in Manual Sand, or Sandslash in the recently drafted Amora's Hail. And then his defense isn't even too bad, with Vaporeon and Shuckle putting in a ton of work. You'd think that the lack of focus on one kind of playstyle would be detrimental, but on the contrary, this makes the Birbs so hard to prepare for with these mini cores everywhere. Too many potential options to cover with a single team of 6. This is such a well-built team, but let's just start breaking it down. Liepard is definitely good value for a 20-point Mon, with a lot of support options via Prankster, but I don't see it doing too much in this match. If it comes, it'll probably be to set some kind of weather, but I'm anticipating other Pokemon to be doing that. I just don't think Liepard would make too much impact outside of that niche. Alchemy could be a decent Special Wall or Calm Mind Sweeper, with pretty good Fairy coverage for the matchup, but it's not fast or physically bulky, so I don't see it getting too far against my team. The coverage with Mystical Fire is actually a little more threatening than I would have liked, but I think it's the stats that let this one down just a little bit for me. And after those two, I had to throw my hands up in the air and wonder which of the remaining 9 Pokemon were coming. All of them are just so good against my team. But if I had to narrow anything down, I started with Gallade, which is a hard-hitting fighting type with interesting coverage that even includes Leaf Blade if he wants a stronger hit on Mudsdale, but it doesn't hit that hard, and it feels like Michael would have some faster or stronger threats to turn to for his offensive core. Definitely not bad though. Next up is going to be Amora, which is obviously here as hail support for the Sandslash, and that makes it a terrifying threat. The thing is though, Sandslash is terrifying inside and out of hail to my team, just thanks to the matchup it has, so I don't think Amora is necessary for it, especially when Slush Rush won't help Sandslash beat out Surge Shift for Raichu. And if Slush Rush isn't that necessary here, what else does Amora do? I mean, it's a Rocks and Aurora Veil setter, I guess, and kinda bulky with a Violite, but it runs a lot of opportunity costs from a team that's otherwise packed with many threats. And these team slots are just so hard to decide, but I'll go with Lycanroc missing the cut as well. Sandrush is really good for outspeeding everything, even Raichu in terrain, but Mudsdale exists as a pretty good answer to any of its attacks, meaning it would need to wait until the late game to get a full sweep going. Outside of that sweeping role, it offers a strong priority Accelerock, but I think it's a bit outclassed in the priority department by another big pick. That pick being Alolan Sandslash. I have referenced it already here, but it is just a huge threat against my team. I think I mentioned before that the combination of Ice and Ground is so hard for my team to answer, with most of my resistances to one being weak to the other. Sandslash can run any of its stab Ice moves, and Earthquake to take advantage of that, throw and stab Iron Head to chunk down Lapras and Aromatisse, and priority Ice Shard to stop any revenge attempts from Noivern, and you have a very threatening wall breaker. Like I said earlier, it doesn't even need Slush Rush, since Ice Shard is taking out a lot of my faster answers to it, especially if it manages just to somehow get a Sword Dance boost. What a good Pokemon. I loved using it in Season 8, and I'm going to hate being on the receiving end of it this time. Next up is going to be Charizard, which has the potential to be a great wall breaker that could even be boosted by Sun, either set by itself or one of its teammates, or a setup sweeper with Dragon Dance or something like that. I'm definitely more expecting the standard special attacking set, which doesn't even need Sun to throw out very powerful attacks, although Sun would be helpful for it to get that power boost as well as access to Solar Beam for my water types. Or singular water type. I don't know what I'm saying. My bad. Defensively, Charizard's not even too bad. It definitely checks Blaziken, and it could switch into other things like Decidueye or Aromatisse under the right circumstances. Definitely a tough thing to deal with. Those two wall breakers will definitely be supported by Vaporeon, which is so hard to break without my telegraphed electric types, and it can pass giant free wishes off to its teammates by using Flip Turn. Like I said, my electric types do scare it, but shockingly, it doesn't have to stay in on them, and otherwise it does really well versus my attackers like Noivern and Blaziken. Shuckle seems like a weird Pokemon to be investing prep for, but Michael has used it really well this season, setting weather for his offensive teammates, getting up easy hazards, and walling much more than you would think with Vaporeon's Wish support. It also has the unique Sticky Web, which I'm not actually too concerned about. I'm more worried about a moveset with Stealth Rock, Toxic, or Infestation as options because that's just so annoying, especially backed up by Vaporeon. And then we have the other Raichu, contesting mine with Lightning Rod and the ability to boost up with Nasty Plot itself and hit most of my team really hard. I've been loving the coverage my Raichu gets, and the same applies to its Kanto counterpart, minus the Psychic coverage, with Surf, Grass Knot, and Focus Blast to blow apart my team. And although it doesn't get the doubled speed, its electric moves still do get boosted to frightening levels in terrain. Lastly, Flygon feels like a pretty easy bring, as a sturdy immunity to both electric and ground. Not only does it have those immunities, but it's also a fast ground type that can hit my entire team with Earthquake, plus its choice of coverage to hit Decidueye and Noivern, most likely a Dragon type move. This thing could be a Choice Scarf or Choice Band, or it could be a utility attacker with Roost and Defog, or it could even be fully defensive to better answer the electric types in Mudsdale. And the problem is, I can see all of those being viable brings this week, so this is a very unpredictable threat. For my side, I was really close to bringing Decidueye. Ghost moves look pretty spammable into this team, but Decidueye's speed and defense stats are really holding it back against Charizard and Sandslash's Ice Shard. The opposing team just feels too offensive for Decidueye to make too much progress, and the same kind of applies to Blaziken, who could wall break but tends to invite in Charizard and Flygon, two Pokemon that I don't really want to be giving extra switching opportunities. So I actually started the team building process with Lapras, which makes for a pretty good answer to Vaporeon, Shuckle, and Flygon. This might look like a weird set, but it's designed to beat out the Birbs' potential weather setters with Rain Dance and a very specialized EV spread. The special attack investment ensures a 2-hit KO on specially defensive Amora with Surf, or a 3-hit KO if it has a Violite, while also 1-hit KO on Charizard in Rain. 88 defense ensures we avoid the 2-hit KO from offensive Flygon Stone Edge, and the rest goes into special bulk to fare a little better against Charizard. And we've also got Heal Bell on this set, which will be good utility overall, but specifically helps against Toxic, which will be Vaporeon's only way to really damage Lapras. We are first and foremost acting as a Vaporeon counter, using Water Absorb to prevent flip turns, so it can't give out free wishes while we deal really good damage back with Freeze Dry. Now we'll move on to Noivern, who could potentially abuse those rain turns with a perfectly accurate Hurricane. We outspeed Michael's entire team with a given EV spread, so Noivern is a good offensive check to Raichu, Non-Scarf, Flygon, Charizard, and Gallade. Defog is also great because the Birbs' hazard game is pretty good. And we are running enough special defense to switch in on one Air Slash from Sun Boosted Charizard before retaliating with our higher speed stat, making Noivern a decent emergency check to it. And now let's get into the terrain core, starting with Alolan Raichu. So there are 2 electric immunities on the opponent's side, but both of them are hit really hard by a Life Orb boosted Psychic, so that's all the coverage I'll be looking at for this battle. This is a set we're used to at this point. Life Orb is used to boost an already powerful Rising Voltage into wall breaking levels, so Raichu can bust a hole through the opponent's side or even sweep in the late game. Volt Switch is great to break something down while just keeping Raichu safe from the follow-up. Wish is just filler, but it could be useful if I get a free turn, like against the Shuckle or something, to get a little boost in HP to any pivot. The EVs maximize damage output while always outspeeding Charizard under neutral conditions. Of course, to support Raichu is Pincurchin with Electric Surge and the Terrain Extender to give Raichu as many boosted turns as possible. The set is pretty standard, Rising Voltage and Scald form perfect coverage versus plus the threat of burn, while Spikes applies offensive pressure, and Recover helps preserve my Terrain Setter. Those terrain turns are going to be very important for both Raichu and Pincurchin to keep our electric moves threatening. The EV spread with Modest preserves the power of our moves while also making for a better answer to Michael's special attacks, most importantly allowing us to switch into Raichu and Vaporeon a little more easily. Up next is Mudsdale, who is running the same valuable physically defensive set with a pretty standard list of moves. The weaker Smackdown is all the coverage we need, bringing Flygon down to the ground while still hitting Charizard plenty hard, thanks to that quad weakness to Rock. And Toxic is a different way to pressure defensive Flygon, while also being our best way to put pressure on Vaporeon and Shuckle. Finally, as a bit of extra insurance against Sandslash, and kind of also a handy Shuckle answer, I'm bringing Berserker, with a Shuka Berry to handle Sandslash's Earthquake on top of naturally resisting its dual stabs. Steely Spirit boosted Iron Head actually does pretty good damage back, and it also chunks down Shuckle while one-hit KOing Amora, while Taunt prevents both of them from setting up their usual shenanigans. Seed Bomb hits Vaporeon and Raichu harder, and U-Turn gives us a pivot move to gain momentum against anything faster than max speed Amora, which is what the Speed EVs are for. That's the team. If anything, I feel like I'm well prepared to beat the Weather Setters and each individual core that I mentioned at the very least. Let's see how we do in the battle. No Raichu in favor of Lycanroc, but otherwise everything looks about like what I expected. Lycanroc probably means Accelerock is coming to beat my own Alolan Raichu, and it makes Mudsdale a lot more valuable for this matchup. I'll have to preserve it pretty well for certain threats. Now that I think about it, I hadn't really looked at the lead matchup until now, but I decided that Shuckle is pretty likely to set early hazards. If that's the case, Berserker will make for a nice answer to either taunt or threaten with a strong Iron Head. Good luck to Michael. Yep, that is the Shuckle. Very nice. Iron Head actually probably won't KO. In fact, it's barely a 2-hit KO. Jeez, Shuckle's bulky. And I don't want to rely on the Fluent's chance to prevent the turn 1 rocks, so taunt it is. That's going to go right into Vaporeon, which makes a lot of sense as an Iron Head switch-in. This is definitely a worse matchup for me, but I'm happy enough with preventing an early game Shuckle from doing its thing. Alright, so let's figure out how to deal with this Vaporeon. Now, here's a question. What moves do you think a taunted Vaporeon has access to? Your guess is probably similar to mine. Scald, Flip Turn, and maybe covered with Ice Beam, but even that's stretching it. Most Vaporeon sets use mono water coverage with Toxic to hit other water types, which it can't even use right now, so Lapras looks like the most free switch in the world to soak up the Scald. So what am I going to do this turn? Well, I click Seed Bomb, and then take a Scald for over half, and I have to get lucky avoiding the burn. This, in hindsight, was a pretty big mistake, partially because I had a very easy switch into this Vaporeon, but also, what was Shuka Berserker's role in this battle? He was supposed to act as a Sandslash switch-in, but now he's at 45% and can't even stomach 2 hits. Even if I was predicting the Vaporeon would switch to something that would beat Lapras, U-Turn was absolutely the option to cover that, while also bringing Lapras on the water move. I don't know what I was thinking with that turn. But at the very least, I mean, Seed Bomb got some damage in, pretty clearly showing max physical defense on the Vaporeon, which is good info that we could have also learned by clicking U-Turn, but whatever, we have to move on. On this turn, I am going to go for the U-Turn play that I should have made before, and then Lapras is going to come in to take that Scald with our Water Absorb. Wow, what an easy play. At least I can make the most of this because I'm in a fairly nice position right now. This whole play wasn't all that bad. Freeze Dry is a 2-hit KO from this range, and nothing actually wants to come in and take a hit from Lapras right now, so attacking will be the easy play. Vaporeon is going to have its taunt end this turn and sensibly goes for a Wish before Freeze Dry gets pretty good damage, and that's the freeze. Well, that's very nice, not gonna lie. As it stands, this Vaporeon has a pretty low chance of getting the Protect that it probably wants it to heal up, and Scald would thaw it, but that would accomplish literally nothing before I would still KO with Freeze Dry the next turn. So it could switch out and Scald later to thaw itself, but it's at such low HP that that play would probably only work against Mudsdale, and even that's a risk. So the Vaporeon, as it stays in, it is going to stay frozen and then just go down to another Freeze Dry. I think that was probably his best option. That 20% chance of protecting was really his only chance to get that Vaporeon back into the game in that unfortunate situation. If the Vaporeon hadn't been frozen, we probably would have just used the Protect turn to either set up Rain or more likely switch into one of the Electric types. So, this is already an action-packed game on turn 5, where I'm now up 6-5 thanks to a Chipped Berserker and a Lucky Freeze in my favor. Interestingly enough, the revenge is going to be Shuckle, and I'll just use that to go for a super effective Surf, 32%, not much, and we do get the Stealth Rocks up on our side. That was really poor damage, and I don't like that there's hazards up now, but, I mean, here at least we can get Rain up to boost our Surfs a little bit. Let's do that. As we do that, and we get hit with a Toxic. That shouldn't be a problem, since I can just Heal Bell right up on the next turn. We are going to make that play as the Flygon switches in. Maybe I could have made a read on that Shuckle being pressured out by a Rain boosted Surf, but I did need that Poison gone quick. Anyway, if this Flygon is here to hit me with a Stone Edge, I can take those just fine. Freeze Dry will still take it out. So that's going to be my play. But this is just going to be a U-turn and a crit, although that doesn't matter too much. Freeze Dry is just going to go into Lycan Rock, which will actually take decent damage. Mudsdale is my switch into this guy every time, so we are going to come in and take our Light Rocks damage and take a Stone Edge without any trouble. Now, I'm guessing that Michael will go into one of his non-grounded Pokemon to avoid Earthquake. Flygon seems very likely, so Smackdown would be a neat trick to expose it to Earthquake and get some good damage onto it potentially. On the next turn, we are going to see the switch, and Flygon comes in to take a Smackdown. Very cool. Now, I'm really not sure what the Flygon will want to do this turn. It might be threatened out without its Earthquake immunity, or it can make a move, but either way, it doesn't feel threatening. In that case, I'll go ahead and put my Rocks to match his, and as I go for that play, as the rain actually expires too, he goes for a Giga Drain. That's actually pretty fun special coverage for Flygon. I remember it being used really effectively against Quagsire in a previous week, but Mudsdale doesn't take too much damage there. It's only a single weakness, so not the biggest problem. It becomes a little more problematic if I decide to stay in and keep Mudsdale just to go for a Toxic on the Flygon. I mean, I think this was a bit of a misplay, since like I said before, Mudsdale's HP really needs to be preserved for more important threats, but I don't think this was baseless or anything. The Flygon looks like a defensive or at least utility set, so to be fair, Toxic is really nice to get on it, especially with the Cleric Vaporeon out of the picture. And I think the real misplay here was going for Smackdown on that initial turn. It was a neat trick if I was reading the Flygon, but I didn't take advantage of it at all. I could have used the turn to go for a V Toxic before getting out of there earlier to avoid the second Giga Drain. However, this does put me in a place where it looks like I'm not too concerned about Mudsdale. Maybe it looks like I'm willing to trade it down for Flygon. So Noivern looks like a great drop in here to take a Giga Drain. The play is a little risky, but I need something to take this hit from Mudsdale, and we're going to pull the trigger. We do get the Giga Drain, so we're safe for now. Alright, I'm looking around and seeing that not much wants to take a Draco, so I'll just go ahead and smack something. And on the switch, it's going to be the Shuckle actually takes the Rocks damage and the Draco actually pretty darn well, which is unfortunate. It's too bad because on this next switch in to Berserker, since we're not at risk of taking much more damage from a Shuckle, it does go for Rest. Gross. Our Iron Head for the Shuckle is just going to go into the Charizard switch in. Actually comes in no boots, so it's at pretty low health now, which is interesting. So it does threaten out Berserker, so Noivern's going to be my answer to any move that Charizard can throw out. And on my switch in, it's just going to go for Roost. That's not the best. Michael's getting a lot of free recovery turns thanks to being a step ahead on this switching game. I'll try to keep chipping it down though, and Hurricane is going to be my play this time so I can deal more consistent damage to Shuckle. So as I go for that play on the Charizard, it's the Sandslash that switches in, and Hurricane, miss. That's kind of unfortunate. If the Sandslash is max HP, that's about 30% damage we missed out on. Keep that number in your head for later. Well, this situation is why I was so scared of Sandslash. I cannot allow Noivern to take an Ice Shard. It has way too much use as my Charizard switch-in, and it also puts great pressure on Flygon. That said, I don't have a single switch into the Sandslash, so I guess I'll just maybe sack Berserker? However, Michael's going to make a pretty good read here and just go straight for the Drill Run. Even through my Shuka Berry, it's going to go down. That's actually interesting coverage over Earthquake, not sure why that was, but it's still enough to take me down. And I didn't run the calc at that time, but even running it now, it's sure not helpful. Most Sandslash builds would KO there. Well, at this point, I do switch the Lapras in. It's my only Pokemon that wasn't all that threatened by Sandslash, so let's just revenge with it. Surf's getting pretty easy into it, and Michael's going to make an easy switch out of that, right into Flygon. It's going to take the Surf without too much trouble, although Toxic is still chipping away at it just a little bit. It misses a Stone Edge as I go for another Surf. The play here was supposed to be that, I thought the Flygon was going to U-turn out again because that's what it did last time. So I was going to read it something like a Sandslash or like Handrock switch in with the Surf. I had to get lucky there with the Stone Edge miss, and this Flygon is still here. So we did get lucky with that, so let's just, I guess, finish off the Flygon with another Surf. And we unfortunately do get punished this time with the Stone Edge. Doesn't do that much because I know we could have lived it, but it still sucks to see. That's too bad. Lapras is looking pretty low now, and now it actually does invite in the Sandslash for the revenge. I'll switch to Pincurchin, I guess, I don't have too much left for this thing. A Drill Run would do a lot of damage. We are going to soak up that Iron Head decent, but yeah. If you're familiar with Pincurchin, you may have noticed a lack of yellow on the battlefield, and that's because I forgot to check my ability before the battle. Okay, so I may have briefly considered Lightning Rod on Pincurchin to be the better answer to Raichu, but that's obviously not the strategy I ended up going up with. I wanted to have my own electric terrain up for this. I just forgot to change the ability back into Teambuilder when I changed my strategy. Yeah, this is a pretty inexcusable mistake, and we'll talk about it later, but for now I have to move on. The Iron Head damage here is actually pretty strong for a bulky resist, and it indicates a choice band, but I sure didn't check that calc during the battle. Regardless, Pincurchin really isn't too useful here if we can't set terrain, so this was just going to be a sack to Drill Run, but of course, Iron Head is going to come out, which, despite me not knowing about the band, is probably the right play for me to make, unless the Iron Head flinches. That really sucks, and that's probably about 35% damage we missed out on with Rising Voltage. Remember that number later, too. Anyway, now Pincurchin is really a sack, and we're just going to go down to the next Iron Head for a 4-4 even game. Raichu's going to be the pretty easy choice for the Revenge, and the Sandslash is going to switch out, threatened by that. Shuckle is going to come in to tank the Rising Voltage pretty easily. Ugh, imagine if we were in terrain. The Sleeping Shuckle does give us 2 free turns though, so that's actually going to be a sheer wish on this turn, because I actually can't 2-hit KO it. The question is, who do I pass the wish to? Lapras and Muzzale are both at kinda low health. Lapras could use the extra HP to come in and check Shuckle, while also stomaching a hit from Sandslash later, while Muzzale will be in better shape to deal with like Handrock. I saw it on Lapras, which will come in for that healing on the Sleeping Shuckle. After we Volt Switch for some decent damage, keep it low, make sure of that. And then we go down and we basically just get healed here of our Rocks damage, not much more than that, which is kind of unfortunate. We'll just use the opportunity to 2-hit KO the Shuckle from this range. As we go for a Surf, the Shuckle is able to wake up on this turn and it's just going to hit me with the Toxic. It's interesting. I could and maybe should have gone for the Heal Bell here to keep myself healthy, even if it meant Shuckle would heal back up to full with Rest, because looking around, Lapras kinda needs the extra health to deal with Sandslash later. But instead, I'm just going to go for the KO here, because I wanted to take this Shuckle down now. 4-3 game, as like Handrock is going to be the Revenge. I'm a little ahead on narration, my bad. There it is. And at this rate, Lapras was a little too low health to deal with anything after another Rock Switch in, so that was going to be our sack, and that was our only Ice Resist left. Stone Edge did take us out, but at least Muzdale is here to claim a KO. On the next attack for the like Handrock, this Drill Run isn't going to be much of a problem, and we're just going to retaliate with an Earthquake to take 3-2 in our favor. From here, Charizard actually does make a lot of sense to take me out, and Noivern will be my switch in every time to take that Fire Blast for just a little under half. Dang, that's strong. Hurricane is going to be my play. Thankfully hits on the next turn. Draco would have been more accurate there, but I wanted to preserve my special attack stat. And now, Sandslash is his last Pokemon in, and as I'm sure you've noticed at this point, I am all out of Pokemon that can stomach any Ice-type moves. The Sandslash will of course go for Ice Shard before my Draco can hit anything, and takes me out with a crit that absolutely did not matter, and Raichu's going to be my play here. I'm hoping to get as much damage as I can with it, but it's going to click Ice Shard and take me out, and yeah, now it clicks. The Ice Shard KO on what should have been a decent roll for Raichu, the multiple Iron Heads into Pincurchin that I did not calc. Yeah, this is a choice band, isn't it? I'm really kicking myself for not realizing that earlier. I could have tried to save an Ice Resist for that Ice Shard, but instead it's running through my whole team. And the last thing I can bring in is Muzdale. Maybe by some chance I survive Ice Shard. It is weak base power and retaliate with an Earthquake, but that hope is going to be dashed pretty quickly by the Ice Shard crit. I go down, taking my first loss of the season, 1-0. And don't feel too bad about that crit. Turns out that the Ice Shard was going to KO almost every time, with the only one damage roll of the 16 being in my favor. Good game to Michael, who did play incredibly well. Very good call on recognizing the Choice Band Sandslash as a win condition near the end, and taking out or chipping down all the threats that could have stopped it. And despite the Vaporeon going down early, the pressure from the rest of the team gave him a lot of opportunities to keep his squad healthy anyway. Between Shuckle's rest as well as the Roost from Charizard, giving me just enough turns to chip down my team for that Sand Slash. As far as hacks goes, we'll talk about the missed damage on that Sand Slash. Between the Hurricane Miss and the Pincurchin Flinch, we missed about 65% damage if the Sand Slash was max HP, and I don't know what the EV spread actually was. Considering it's at 63% by the end of the battle, that's technically all of its remaining health, if I'm correct, and even if we had hit with either one of the attacks of the Sand Slash, probably would have felt a lot more pressured, maybe leading to some different plays being made. But of course, hacks went both ways. Michael losing Vaporeon to a freeze that early was huge. That's some giant wishes that he probably missed out on, and he had to play 5 on 6 from a pretty early point in the game. Add on a missed Stone Edge from Lapras, and I'd say the hacks maybe went even based on their impact, but probably more in my favor if you consider the lower odds of that freeze going in my favor. But of course, I'd like to talk more about the misplays that I made and how they impacted the game, starting with the obvious, not bringing Electric Surge on Pincurchin. This is obviously a huge mistake. I just missed it in my prep. But looking at how the battle played out, maybe it wasn't even that impactful. I don't know. I think the most it would have done for me was neutralizing the Shuckle, maybe preventing that mid-game rest and keeping it at low health for later. The loss of power on my electric moves or speed on Raichu didn't even come into play that much, with Pincurchin getting flinched down before it could even hit anything, and Raichu going down to an Ice Shard before hitting anything outside of the Shuckle. Of course, that means the Iron Head flinch on Pincurchin would have been a lot more influential if I did have terrain, but that wasn't the case, was it? And as far as Raichu goes, Michael definitely suggested that he had been prepared to better handle a Raichu sweep with the use of multiple priority moves. No doubt he had Accelerock in there too for that purpose. And while it's not like I had to use Raichu as a late game sweeper, that sure is what I decided to go with it in this match, so Raichu didn't end up being too effective either way, I think. Maybe it's the way I built it, maybe it's the matchup, I'll just have to keep those things in mind in the team builder if I do end up meeting the Birbs in the playoffs. Outside of the Electric Terrain Core, I think my prep was actually pretty decent, with Mudsdale working as a great Lycanroc answer in practice, and Lapras of course being great against Vaporeon. I think the problem was with my play and how I used those Pokemon. Berserker was designed to be a stop with Sandslash, so why did I waste him on a Scald to go down below half on turn 2? Getting damage on Vaporeon actually, it did pan out nicely, but that sure didn't help in the endgame when I didn't have an Ice Shard resist left. Mudsdale could have prevented that situation too, but instead I stayed in on too many Giga Drains from the Flygon so I could get a Toxic off on it. Once again, decent way to deal with the Flygon that worked out for me, but at what cost? Michael was playing to bring every Sandslash check down into range, while I was just playing for the threat in front of me without thinking about preserving my own team. I was behind on switches, and I didn't make the reads that I needed to when I needed to. I have a few ideas about tightening up my team building and my play, and I'm glad I saw the opportunities to after this battle, but I'll end it here for the sake of keeping it quick and because we're fairly likely to meet in the playoffs with my team as the first seed and theirs as the fourth. So that will wrap up Week 8 as well as the regular season. This was a really fun one, and yes, despite the loss of this match and my undefeated run, I was not at risk of losing my ranking as first for the regular season, so the Noctowls are the first seed for the playoffs. That means a bye through the first round, followed by playing the lowest seed that makes it through to the quarterfinals. In our case, that turned out to be John and the Close Combat Club, who beat the Cincinnati Incineroar in round 1. I will need to get revenge for the homie Matt. So join me in the next time, and we'll see how we tackle that exciting match. I'll see you then.